Alabama, often regarded as a solid red state, faces a perplexing paradox as it stands to be significantly impacted by potential federal program cuts under a second Trump presidency. Despite 66% of Alabama voters supporting Donald Trump in the 2020 election, the state's heavy reliance on federal assistance programs like Medicaid and SNAP could lead to devastating consequences if these programs face reductions. This raises questions about why so many voters in Alabama seemingly vote against their own economic and social interests. Federal program dependency in Alabama. Alabama's reliance on federal programs is substantial. Federal funds cover approximately 70% of the cost of Medicaid in the state. With Medicaid enrollment hovering around 1 million people, roughly 20% of Alabama's 5.2 million residents, any reductions to this funding would have a disproportionate effect. Notably, about half of those covered by Medicaid in Alabama are children. Robin Hayden, executive director of Alabama Arise, emphasized the severe impact cuts could have on Alabama's healthcare infrastructure. For instance, enhanced premium tax credits established under the American Rescue Plan in 2021 made insurance more affordable for many residents. However, these enhanced credits are set to expire, and further cuts to the Affordable Care Act, ACA, could exacerbate the situation. Hayden warns that this could lead to higher rates of uninsured residents, increased uncompensated care burdens for hospitals, and adverse effects on maternal health outcomes. Maternal mortality crisis. Alabama's maternal mortality rate is the highest in the nation, nearly double the national average. The rate is even higher for Black women. Medicaid currently covers 45% of births in Alabama, providing vital prenatal and postpartum care. Any reductions to Medicaid could worsen this crisis, particularly in rural areas where hospitals already struggle to stay afloat. Trump and the GOP's proposed cuts to federal health care programs present a dire threat to the state's ability to provide adequate maternal and infant care, underscoring the contradiction between Alabama voters' support for Trump and their reliance on government programs. Economic vulnerability and tariffs. Trump's proposed tariffs also pose a significant risk to Alabama's economy, which is heavily dependent on industries like automotive manufacturing. The state previously faced job losses during Trump's first term when tariffs led to increased production costs and retaliatory tariffs from other countries. In 2018, then-Governor Kay Ivey warned that Alabama could lose up to 4,000 automotive jobs due to tariffs. Despite this, some Republican leaders in the state, such as Senate Majority Leader Garland Gudger, continue to support Trump's tariff policies, arguing they are necessary to protect American jobs. However, economists broadly agree that tariffs raise consumer prices and slow economic growth. Mass deportation policies and Alabama's immigrant population. Another pillar of Trump's agenda is mass deportation, which could have widespread social and economic ramifications for Alabama. The state's Hispanic population grew by 3.8% in 2022, reaching 250,000 people. Approximately 60,000 undocumented immigrants reside in Alabama, contributing to the economy and labor force. Alabama Arise warns that mass deportation policies could create labor shortages, disrupt families, and force immigrants into the shadows, making them less likely to report crimes or access available benefits. The 2011 passage of HB 56, one of the nation's strictest immigration laws, offers a cautionary tale. It led to immediate economic disruption, labor shortages, and heightened fear within immigrant communities. Repeating such policies could harm Alabama's economy and public safety. The disconnect between voting patterns and policy impact. Alabama is a receiver state, meaning it receives more federal dollars than it contributes in taxes, with a ratio of 2 to 1. Federal programs like Medicaid and SNAP provide lifelines for low-income families. Approximately 750,000 Alabamians, or 15% of the state's population, rely on SNAP benefits, and 1 in 5 children live in poverty. Despite this dependency, Alabama voters continue to support Republican candidates who advocate for cutting these very programs. State Senator Marika Coleman highlighted the contradiction, attributing it to entrenched partisanship rather than economic self-interest. Coleman emphasized that protecting federal funding is essential to maintaining Alabama's fragile social safety net. Proposed budget cuts and the threat to vulnerable populations. Trump's unofficial advisory group, known as the DOGE, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, has floated plans to slash federal spending by 30%. Such drastic reductions could decimate programs like Medicaid, SNAP, and ACA subsidies, leaving vulnerable populations in Alabama without essential support. Hayden argues that federal programs reflect societal values, emphasizing the need to protect children, families, and struggling communities. In a state where 25% of children face food insecurity, cuts to SNAP would worsen hunger and poverty rates, undermining efforts to improve long-term economic stability. Cultural and media influences on voting behavior. Media coverage and political rhetoric often deflect attention from substantive policy issues. During the 2020 campaign, much of the focus was on cultural controversies such as transgender athletes and immigration, rather than economic and healthcare policies directly affecting voters. This diversion of attention may explain why many voters prioritize cultural grievances over economic interests. For instance, Alabama's strict reproductive laws correlate with its high maternal mortality rate, yet debates often focus on ideological battles rather than tangible policy solutions. Conclusion: facing the consequences. The potential for cuts to federal programs, tariffs that harm industry, and mass deportations highlights the precarious position Alabama faces under another Trump administration. While voters overwhelmingly supported Trump, the policies his administration and GOP leaders advocate threaten to undermine the state's economic stability and social safety nets. Alabama's reliance on federal funding underscores the need for informed voting decisions that prioritize economic realities over partisan loyalties. As Alabama grapples with these challenges, the disconnect between policy impacts and voting patterns remains a critical issue for policymakers, advocates, and voters to address. For more in-depth coverage of these issues, visit AL.com and consider supporting their investigative journalism. Stay informed and engaged as we navigate these pressing concerns affecting Alabama and the nation.